Now, regularly, I see people who eat meat consume alternative proteins too, just as a way to add variety to their diet. So that's what I see Mighty Cricket as. It's I don't intend for people to replace 100% of their meat consumption with bugs, but if we replace a small amount, even 1% is even a big win for us.
Today I chatted with Sarah Schlafly, founder and CEO of a company called Mighty Cricket. Mighty Cricket is a cricket-based protein powder company that practices sustainable farming and provides management for food waste while also providing exceptionally high nutritional value. Today we chat about crickets as an alternative protein source, involving conversations about sustainability benefits, battling consumer stigma about bug consumption, and how our company positions itself in the market. This is Earth ABC featuring Sarah Schlafly. Sarah, thank you so much for taking the time to join me. I love how your company is all about good for your health, good for the planet, but it's even more so intriguing that it involves bugs as a food source. And to be honest, like most people, the idea for me of eating crickets sounds more like a dare than a dietary choice. But because climate change continues to cause like widespread food shortages, this is definitely something to have on our radar. And you gave a TED Talk embracing bugs as a food source. So I'd love to ask you, how does your company Mighty Cricket come into this picture?
Well, we started back in 2018, and our goal was basically to find the best protein on the planet. And in all things, I found that in bugs, which was a little bit off-putting to me at first. But when I researched about it and how like other cultures use this, and it's so clean and healthy and sustainable, I found it really compelling, the facts. And so that's what propelled me to start exploring cuisines and like different foods I can make from the insects. And I didn't really want to eat insects because I'm an American and Americans don't do that.
Right.
But I realized like any ingredient, it's all about presentation and what you do with it. So like years ago, no one liked kale or knew much about kale. And then all these recipes started coming out about kale and it became the superfood of the year. Same with cauliflower. People started doing all sorts of innovative things with cauliflower. And there are like so many foods. Quinoa was a food that was really popular for a period of time. And I don't want crickets to be like a fad. I want it to actually be something that's a regular part of our diets.
Totally. And I bet a segment of vegans like rave about like cricket protein, but at the same time, there's got to be like objections to consuming bugs, like you said, in like the Western world. What are some of the common objections that you receive about the cricket-based protein?
Well, the biggest stigma is that crickets and bugs in general are dirty, scary, and gross. Right? Those are the big three things.
Yeah.
So one of the misperceptions is like, am I going to get diseases from eating bugs because, they crawl on the ground and stuff like that. So we make sure that we have messaging around the way that the crickets are raised and harvested and how clean the process is. And then, people are just scared by looking at a whole bug and wouldn't think about putting it in their mouths, which is funny because we look at whole lobsters, like the lobsters presented to us in its full form shape oftentimes. And that's like fine dining, when it's in that presentation. If you look at the anatomy of a cricket and compare it to the anatomy of a lobster, they look very similar. But it's just our cultural training, right? So the way we overcome that fear is by powdering the bug so that it's just another protein powder.
Right.
And from there, we can blend it into delicious foods or just blend it in a regular, ordinary protein shake with this little twist. But it's when you drink it, it doesn't seem weird or anything other than ordinary.
Mm-hmm. And I know for like the protein powder market, texture is like a big thing, and how well it mixes like with water, how well it dissolves. So from a comparison point of view, from your product versus like traditional protein powders, how does it fare in terms of the solubility and then also sure.
Yeah. So we're working on ways to solubilize the protein now. Can we add a chitinase to break down the protein structure so that it's water soluble? So we're doing experimentation on that. Meanwhile, we do a really fine grind on our powder so that when it blends, it suspends longer and it's a finer particle size. So there's lots of research to be done on solubility. The industry's so early that right now we're taking it more like right now we're just working on going through all the research and figuring it out. I would say that my favorite application for the protein powder is actually putting it in a smoothie and adding in like additional fruits and vegetables rather than just using it with milk or water. So that's my favorite thing to do with it. But for the convenience, some people just like to add it with some beverage and stir it up.
I'm with you. Like I basically make smoothies all the time with like mixed berries, banana, like that's my go-to. And once you go like the smoothie route, just doing a plain water and milk just doesn't really cut it. And the protein ingredient industry itself is huge. I was pleasantly surprised that it's $76 billion industry. So pretty sizable. In terms of the room for alternative protein sources in this industry, what does that look like to you?
Let's see. I mean, there's always so much potential in this space given how huge the protein market is. Now, the alternative protein market is a smaller segment, but it's definitely growing. And like in 2018, it was growing very rapidly with the plant-based alternatives. Those kind of slowed and took a little bit of a nosedive just because they had exploded so quickly with Beyond Meat and Impossible. They kind of were leading the way for a couple of years. So it slowed down, but I think that those two companies sparked a lot of interest and repositioned alternative protein to more of a mainstream audience, whereas before that it was kind of positioned as kind of a vegan thing to do. Yeah. And now regularly I see people who eat meat consume alternative proteins too, just as a way to add variety to their diet. So that's what I see Mighty Cricket as. You know, it's I don't intend for people to replace 100% of their meat consumption with bugs, but if we replace a small amount, even 1% is even a big win for us. So that's kind of where my eyes are set in the market.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And it's also like making sure that at least at a larger scope, that this isn't just like another fad, and you kind of want it to continuously stick. And one of the things you mentioned was like presentation and the perception of people thinking like crickets are dirty. So I imagine Mighty Cricket has some very controlled environment for how you guys raise and nurture crickets. What does that look like for a Mighty Cricket?
Our crickets are farm raised, and when we build the bins get sterilized from harvest to harvest. And then we also do a sanitation step on pretty much their whole habitat gets a sanitation step. So every new batch of crickets gets a clean, fresh slate. And that's your most important thing to do when raising crickets. It's a very simple farming system. It's not, most of the farms, they don't have a sophisticated operation going, but it can be surprisingly difficult to raise crickets because you're dealing with a very delicate creature. And crickets can pick up pathogens that'll wipe them out. And so there's this one virus going around the world. It's called the Denso virus. And right now, Mighty Cricket's doing some research to figure out how we could build a resilient supply chain with this virus that's attacking farms and wiping out the whole cricket population. So that's one of the things moving forward to build up this industry. We need to develop processes that are going to make for a resilient supply chain. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, that's one of the things that we're taking leadership in the industry.
Very neat. When it comes to a cricket farm like yours in particular, is it necessarily contained to just that farm where you have like generations of crickets, or are you bringing in crickets from elsewhere to make sure that the population stays at a high number?
So we, on the farms, the crickets lay the eggs, and those eggs are used for the next generation of crickets. So on average, a female will lay about 100 eggs. So you can scale up a population of crickets very easily and pretty quickly too.
Mm-hmm. And the cricket protein versus like beef comparison, I saw on your website that it uses up 2,000 times less water. Where exactly in the process is that water savings happening?
In the consumption itself. So when cows are drinking, cows just require a lot of water, especially dairy cows. They require a lot of water, and then crickets don't need that much water to support themselves in comparison to cows. So that's where the biggest savings comes from with the water consumption.
Yeah, and them being like really small, I guess just being insects, much less like greenhouse gases, much less land that you need, less feed.
Yes, exactly. Pretty much all of your inputs are going to be fewer pound for pound of cricket protein versus beef protein, and then pork. I was trying to think of the name. Yeah, pork protein is going to be a lot less too. Chickens are fairly efficient, but anytime you move down in the food supply chain, you're going to require fewer resources. So a cricket compared to a chicken, crickets are still going to require fewer resources.
So I imagine then in terms of the business model, you guys have much greater margins than a traditional protein source?
Well, one would hope, but given that it's such a small market, it's in its infancy, and these conventional proteins have had government subsidies, they've had decades of research poured into it, and they also have economies of scale working for them. They just have a lot of advantages that can make them produce this like mass quantities of meat for very cheap. And the US has gotten very good at mass producing cheap meats. Now, this doesn't mean that it's good for the animal. It doesn't mean it's good for the planet. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's good for us. But when it comes to our upfront costs that we're paying for it, it's going to be cheaper. We may have health consequences on the back end that we're paying for. But the insect market, we don't have all of these advantages, if you want to call them advantages. It's still a very organic operation. And that's one of the reasons why I consider it so clean, is because it hasn't yet been adulterated by our modern technology that manipulates our food sources and turns them from like really clean food to slightly questionable food.
Yeah, I really like how you called it an organic operation. When it comes to, I guess, like food waste, I'm thinking like maybe there's some upcycling. So what percentage of like the food waste are you successfully upcycling through your cricket farming process?
The percentage, I can't give a percentage because I haven't calculated that at all, but we're also in research mode for that. So I can tell you that we have secured every week 11,000 pounds of bread waste, just bread waste, in a 13-mile radius of where we're doing research. So we have access to that much waste coming from food manufacturers every week. It's just so much bread. So our idea was, there's all this food waste. I think up to 30 to 40% of our food that the U.S. grows ends up in landfills. And so the carbon emissions from that food that's ending up in landfills ends up being more than the transportation industry. So crazy amount of waste happening in our food system. And so our idea was, how do we capture that waste before it reaches the consumer, not post-consumer waste? So this would be shrinkage happening at grocery stores. This would be waste that's happening at the manufacturing level, So it's not food scraps from consumers' plates when they're dining out. That's not what we're talking about. So how do we capture that and contribute to decreasing the amount of waste that's ending up in our landfills? So we're pulling that straight from the food manufacturers, all the pounds of food that they have to throw away due to like being off spec, or maybe it's trimmings that they don't use in their production. And then we feed that to the crickets, and we ran our first research test was, can we produce successfully a second generation of crickets from that? And so we were able to produce offspring from this waste that were viable and successfully grown. And so then the second research phase that we're currently doing is, how does this waste impact their flavor? Does it have a positive impact? Does it have a negative impact on flavor, or does it have no impact at all? And so we're currently testing that right now.
Mm-hmm. This is like such a basic question, but like, what is the lifespan of a cricket on your farm?
So on the farm, the crickets are harvested between 5 and 6 weeks. After that, crickets will live for about 12 weeks in the wild, but after that, they start consuming a lot of food without building mass. So we harvest them around the 5-6 week mark, and then we clean, rinse them, and do a blanching step, and then they go get dehydrated and milled down into a powder.
Gotcha. And you mentioned before that you take the food waste from these food manufacturers. Are they paying you in any capacity to take it off their hands?
Right now, we're just collecting the waste for free, but we have looked at, pricing models of what we could charge based on our competitors. And it wasn't that much, to be honest. It was like $50 for a ton. Oh, hang on, let me figure out which tab. Okay, we got it. So it ended up not being that huge of a revenue stream, but that is something that we looked at was, can this be an additional revenue stream if we want it to be? And there is a little bit of money there if we wanted to go after it.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Because I imagine if they didn't have a way to dispose of the food waste, then they would probably be nipped with some type of compliance negligence with handling that food waste?
That would depend on the local municipality and the regulations there, which varies from state to state. I don't know if it varies by county to county, even at the very local level. But when I did the research, it seemed like some of the food manufacturers were paying to have some of it composted, which I thought was a good step. You know, if you can't donate it, that's number one, is can you get that food donated to hungry people or food pantries, something like that. Some manufacturers don't want to donate off-spec products because they don't want, you know, their brand to be tainted in that way. So if you can't donate it, then can you upcycle it into an animal feed? And if you can't do that, then the third step would be composting. The last step being thrown in the landfills, which is what we're trying to avoid.
Gotcha. I'm curious to hear about traction to date, especially since you guys have been in business for several years now. What notable like customers or partners would you like to like shout out?
Yeah. Our biggest partner right now is Amazon. So that's where most of our sales come from. Consumers, you know, there aren't a lot of consumers who are searching for cricket protein online. So we get some consumers picking us up by searching for similar things like alternative proteins. So that's a big partner. And then in December, I was featured on a new Amazon show. It's called Buy It Now. So they put me on episode 11, I believe. This is their first season doing it. So the show had good viewership. I'm not sure. It wasn't any Shark Tank like viewership because, you know, it was their first season. So as the show gains popularity, if they do a second and third season, then I think our visibility would be even greater, which would be awesome. But that was really fun to go out to LA and film for this show. And then our other biggest win was receiving a grant from the USDA to conduct this food waste research. And so in total investment from the USDA was about close to $800,000. So that was a nice bump in our ability to conduct research and also explore more marketing methods too.
Neat. And I know like protein efficacy is like a big deal. And so we'll call that complete protein. And apparently cricket protein, or at least yours, is 2 times more complete than beef. So in terms of that, would someone like a bodybuilder find, I guess, this alternative protein source kind of like a no-brainer over other protein sources?
It depends what their goals are. A lot of bodybuilders are looking for massive quantities. So a lot of them tend to be looking for the cheaper protein sources, whereas our protein's a higher quality. And a lot of our consumers are not bodybuilders because, you know, they're paying for a higher quality protein. And bodybuilders tend to be looking for high quantity, maybe lower cost. So our target audience tends to be the super health conscious, not necessarily just bodybuilders, but just very health conscious consumers who read labels. They're very good at reading the back of the labels. They are already supplementing with maybe spirulina. Maybe they use wheatgrass. You know, some of those like quirkier ingredients, nutrition yeast, things like that. And the one cool thing about the cricket protein is that it's really high in vitamin B12, which as a vegan is difficult to find in plant-based proteins. You typically find B12 in the animal-based proteins. There you go.
Yeah.
So you get a full dose of vitamin B12, your full daily value of B12 in one serving of cricket protein. So that's one of my favorite features about the product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely sounds like a really complete protein choice for the super health conscious. The two food sources or ingredients that you mentioned, I think I've only heard of spirulina, if that was how you pronounce it. But yeah, it was super interesting to hear about the unsuspecting completeness of cricket-based protein, and also the future that it holds for how it plays into helping address the widespread food shortages. Very interesting to learn about this, and I appreciate you taking the time to join me in conversation today, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this interview, follow along on Earth ABC's LinkedIn to stay connected and never miss what's going on in climate tech. If you'd like to reach out or you're interested in coming on as a guest, feel free to connect with me, Sean Pack, on LinkedIn. We're always looking for inspiring ventures and founders in the climate space to feature on the show. Hope you enjoyed. Until next time.